Many of you may know Mike Stevens, who is basically the guy that knows all about the entire landscape. I think you published a new infographic today about all the market research companies in the AI space. So it's going to be fun to learn about your perspective here. We've got Charlotte from Virtual Store Trials, who knows a ton about creating virtual experiences to help understand the retail experience. And we've got Annett Pecher here from Emotional Logic, who really understands going past the survey experience into real behavioral and emotional tracking. So have a seat. So I gave a light introduction, but let me give you guys a chance to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit more about what you do. And why don't you start, since you've got the mic.
Great idea. So I'm a director of Emotional Logic, and we specialize in measuring unconscious factors because a lot of consumer behavior is driven by unconscious factors. And we do use a lot of quantitative methods, but also qualitative techniques that sort of get underneath the surface to get some deeper information on behavior.
There's going to be a lot to do too there. Fantastic. Charlotte, tell us a little more about yourself.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Charlotte. I work at VST, so it stands for Virtual Store Trials, so it's all about understanding behaviour at fixtures. So we work a lot with retailers and brands, and I guess in that sense, we're trying to test out how people's behaviour without asking them what they're going to do. We measure what they actually do at fixture. I guess where that is a bit different to other people is that we work also directly with the retailers and sort of talk with the retailers and brands. So it's a much more kind of category and shopper focused piece of work.
Fantastic. Mike, tell us a little more about yourself.
Thanks. I do proper research like these guys. I run a little website. It's called Insight Platforms, a big directory of research tools, and we do virtual events and training courses. And the pitch is it's all about research technology. So QuestionPro is one of my clients, so I won't be taking too much of that free bar later on. Staying polite, and as the rest of you are in the room. So that's what I do.
Fantastic. Well, this is going to be a fun session. As you can see, we've got kind of some different perspectives on how to kind of take that core survey experience and push past that into some of these more advanced models, really tracking behavior. So Annett, maybe we can start with you, and maybe we can have you kind of tell us a little bit more about how you're incorporating this kind of behavioral tracking, behavioral science into your research methodologies.
Similar to what Charlotte has said, we're trying to get sort of beyond the say-do gap in terms of what people say in research isn't always reflecting what they're actually doing in real life. In order to do that, we need to measure conscious and unconscious perceptions, feelings, behaviors. The conscious element is relatively easy to measure. We can ask questions in surveys and people give us answers. But on the unconscious side, we've got a number of different techniques. So we use psychology-based qual research to really dig underneath the surface. But more recently, there have been a lot of advances, innovations, things like online eye tracking, implicit testing, which allow us to also measure unconscious elements at scale with larger audiences and quicker and more effectively. So we do combine those into a combined methodology, measuring the conscious and the unconscious to understand more about the decision process.
So tell us a little bit more about what's the difference that you see when you kind of measure both the conscious and the unconscious? Is there behaviors mapping to what they're actually telling you in the survey, or do you see pretty dramatic differences between the two?
The drivers of behavior really. So we know what people do or don't do. We know whether they're customers or non-customers. And they give us reasons why they're customer or non-customer, but a lot of the time it doesn't really ring true because when we correct those factors, nothing happens. So we need to really see beyond that. And for some of our retailers, we have measured the things that customers telling us are important to them, like price and packaging and customer service. And we've also tracked the unconscious factors, which tends to be emotions, how we make customers feel. And when we track both of those things against till receipts and repeat purchasing, the emotions have a much higher correlation to repeat purchasing than the things our customers tell us. So we really need to get to those factors because they are driving bottom line, they're driving turnover and sales. So they're not sort of fluffy things that we should measure as a sort of additional thing. They're actually down to the pipeline performance as well.
So maybe walk us through some kind of the tactical elements here. How do you set this up between the conscious, the unconscious? How are you actually measuring emotions and comparing that back to the things that people are telling you in their surveys?
So what we do is when we get a brief, we look at what is the decision process that the customer is going through, and we basically, our experts look at which elements might be coming into play, and then we look at all the methodologies that are currently available. So we usually combine, so if it's a quantitative study, we might combine some traditional questions with some conjoint, with some online eye tracking, measuring different components of the same situation, and then analyze all of that together. And then we can usually see what's driving things.
And so that emotional piece, is that mainly coming from the eye tracking? How do you know what my emotions are?
So the emotional piece can come either from qualitative research. So we provide you some qualitative research as a pre-stage to measure the emotions, because a lot of the time people aren't aware of them. And then we can use that in quant to quantify with a bigger sample of people.
Got it. Very interesting. And so you're using what technologies? How are you kind of pulling this all together to make it an online sort of, is it online, is it offline? Tell us a little bit more about kind of how you're setting it up.
Yes, I mean, we do both online and offline research, but if it is online research, we tend to use different platforms and just basically chain surveys together.
Mm-hmm.
So from an end user's point of view, they're taking one survey. It's a very easy and simple experience for them, and they don't even realize that they've actually been on 3 platforms during that process. So yeah, it's great to be able to do that, because the sort of attention span of the participants is getting shorter and shorter, so the easier we can make the process, the better.
Wow. And it's all online, one experience, and you're kind of getting all sorts of different angles on the data. Amazing. Charlotte, let's go to you and hear a little bit more about how you're creating these virtual environments that are allowing retailers to kind of test whether their product's going to fly off the shelf or not.
I sort of wanted to talk a little bit about the content, like the pain point of why people would do this kind of work. So I'm sure other people in this room know these kind of statistics, but 85% of merchandising changes tend to have no impact in store. And then 95% of new products on fixture kind of don't last past 3 years. So the stuff that's going into supermarkets is being researched, but it isn't always landing, I think. And we're starting to see a lot more research in the area that we work in, which is much more kind of category and shopper, to really make sure that what is going into retailers is the right thing. So I guess, brands are coming to us saying, we want to have more confidence in this, we want to test lots more things, because otherwise you're putting all of your money on just one thing. So I guess, that's how we work with them, is that we're building these virtual environments and we're asking people to go in and shop them. We're understanding that kind of we don't even ask them what they think they'll do. We just are measuring what they do. And we work in a kind of world of sale, volume and value and penetration. So we talk a much more of a category, a much more retailer type output than my old jobs have all been much more brand, much more kind of the softer side of things. And that really aligns with the emotional part of it, but we don't measure that. We care about whether they buy things or don't buy things. So yeah, the other bit which I think is really different for us is that we've set up a system where we actually take the inputs from retailers as well. So we're not in this siloed place where a brand is testing something. We are taking the kind of planogram information from retailers. That's kind of that data comes through into us. We test it, and then what comes back out again can then go back into the retailers and can be implemented in a kind of, I guess, in a more advanced way, because it's not just a data presentation. We can actually build their fixture and we'll know that it will work in store.
So you're effectively recreating the real environment based on the actual planograms from real retailers.
Yeah.
You're putting then the survey subject into this environment. And what are you asking them to do?
It depends on the brief, but the majority of the time we're asking them to shop it how they would shop it if they got to the store. So in some places, if you were thinking about, a mission-based thing like pain, you might say, which doesn't work very well, but you imagine you have a headache, what would you buy? And try and put them into that mindset. And that's important, I think, in kind of more impulse-type places. You might want to put them in that mission. Usually we're asking them just to shop as they typically would. And when a new product is there, then you're seeing, does it stand out? Do people pick it up? Do they pick it up and look at it and then put it back because actually the product hasn't spoken to them? Or do they just no one notice it at all? So, yeah.
What do you look for? These stores have so many products, so many options to choose from. How many people do you have to send through that environment to actually touch the product that you're measuring? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it'll depend on the size of the category. So some categories are just one fixture, and we'll always send like a really big sample through. So we'll send 500 through as an absolute minimum, because we want to be able to not just be like, okay, well, your category sales are this. We want to look at the brand. We want to look at, quite often there'll be a category segmentation in place, and we'll want to look at the results by those segmentations. We have done ones which are like 22 bays, so like, a whole aisle. And at that point, 500 people just isn't enough. So we might go to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people. Because for us, it's really important that we have those big base sizes to make those big, robust decisions on. So yeah, it depends, but like big sample sizes is what we're really into.
Interesting. Obviously, we like big sample sizes.
Yeah, people do.
What's the actual measurement that you're looking for? Is it that somebody looked at the product, picked up the product, actually bought the product, all of the above?
We can most if they buy it, because that's ultimately like what the retailer wants is, are they going to buy the product or not, and what are they buying? So if you're making a merchandising change, and that merchandising change is to try and get someone to buy something healthier, we care that they're buying into something healthier rather than the unhealthy choice. It is interesting to know if they picked it up and put it back down, because then if you've got a load of data which is all around one brand that's happening to, you can be like, okay, well, for that brand, they are interesting enough to pick up, but something isn't then clicking into conversion to purchase. But I guess we would, in the sense of, if that isn't the brand we're working with, we probably don't look as much at that. Yeah.
Very interesting. And so, you're asking somebody to purchase in a virtual environment. Do they have a budget? How do you actually know that this is what they would do in real?
So we've done a load of validation work with the retailers to make sure that what people are doing does reflect actually what's happening at fixture. I would say they tend to maybe spend a little tiny bit more because they don't have an ultimate budget here, but the share of spend that we see tends to really reflect the share of spend in market. So we'll always look at the correct share of spend and our share of spend and make sure that they are within what we'd expect them to be. And it is remarkably accurate. And I think that's also because we have such large sample sizes. If it was 20 people, that would be wildly out. But with the sample size we have, it works out really well.
Fantastic. Well, these are two really good and specific examples of where people are kind of integrating new, more advanced methodologies into the survey experience, where it's really kind of sitting in the middle. It's a new exercise. It gives us much more behavioral data, right? What are people actually doing, and kind of creating a virtual environment for that. But let's go over to Mike, because Mike's got a really interesting kind of perspective on the entire landscape and seeing a whole bunch of these different tools that have these different methodologies. What are you seeing out there in terms of where the overall ResTech ecosystem is going? What are some of the cooler methodologies that you're seeing out there that can kind of be integrated into some of these survey experiences?
Yeah, thanks, Aseem. I think one of the big things that is evolving with surveys and is going to have a big impact is the use of video. I mean, how many people they use video for feedback, for research, for integrating with surveys right now? Yeah, so a handful, so it's small. It's going to grow. And what I think, when you work with survey data, it becomes so sort of normalized. You don't realize that it's such a legacy of previous technology constraints. The way that we design surveys, the way that we do them, came from paper and pen, came from punch cards, came from being able to, quickly process lots of data with scanning tools, and so a lot of that stuff is embedded in the survey technology that we have now. Imagine being able to just have a conversation as a participant, as a respondent, as a consumer, to say, this is what I want to tell you about. It's the stuff that matters to me, not the boxes that you've decided I need to give you feedback in. And the way that video technology is developing is making this much more accessible. So there's a kind of, ubiquity of smartphones and cloud processing and all of the tech that enables that. There's a shift in consumer user behavior. There's a much greater levels of comfort with recording yourself. I mean, not my generation, but my daughter, and it's much more commonplace for people to put videos of themselves and to Instagram, whatever. So you've got this normalized behavior, and you put all that together, and you've got a much more natural human way of gathering data from people. So what do you then do with the data that you've collected? You've got very effective speech-to-text transcription now. Some of the tools that we've got from OpenAI, the Whisper, tools like that, are very, very effective in multiple languages. They're very quick and accurate. You can translate very easily. You can use text analytics to identify sentiment. You can use now computer vision AI to identify what's actually in the image, what's in shot. Is it a brand logo? Is somebody smiling? What's the emotion that they're expressing? So you've got this huge, rich data set that's actually embedded in what might be a 30-second video clip. So I think the evolution of surveys and data collection is going to become a lot more natural, a lot more engaged. And if anyone saw the recent OpenAI demo of the voice assistant, so the new 4.0 model with the real-time voice, they haven't released it. I think they're a bit scared that it's not quite safe for public consumption yet. But it's kind of near real time. You've got about a quarter of a second lag on the voice interaction, and you've got a camera that enables, to pick up what's in the environment. Now you think about the richness that has in terms of two-way dialogue. You could have thousands of unstructured conversations with rich media feedback, in the space of a few hours, and you can process it, you can analyze it. So I think, this is quite an exciting, I would say evolution, but it's kind of probably more dramatic than that for the way that we as people who connect other people's opinions into organisations can work with that sort of data. So that's a big one for me. I don't know whether you had others that you wanted to talk about.
Well, let me take a quick poll in the room. Who in here, raise your hand if you would kind of consider yourself a qual researcher? Okay, a few hands. Oh, good. And raise your hand if you consider yourself a quant researcher. Okay, a few more hands. So, Mike, this is like the traditional at odds in the research agent world, right? It's like you're either quant or you're qual. It sounds like this stuff is all converging. Tell us a little bit more about what you see in terms of where this is going.
I think in those definitions, yes, but I don't actually agree, because real qualitative research is about empathy, connection, observation, it's intuition. It's really being able to make a connection, and there's an awful lot of skill and empathy that sits around that. What we're talking about with video is really different currency of data at scale. So it is quant, but it's quantified in a different way. We think of it as qual because we've only been able to do it in a qualitative way in the past, but actually it's new types of quantitative data. I don't really like people talk about qual at scale. I don't really like that because it diminishes the effectiveness of true qualitative research, which is something that is, I hope, still quite a way off for the machines to substitute.
Interesting. Where is this all going? It's very interesting to see a little on that. And now let's come back to you. We've talked a lot about these new kind of behavioral models and experimentation. Obviously, from a client perspective, it's just easier to ask on a survey and not have to go into eye tracking and have them go do another exercise. You probably have to pay more to the sample and the participant. You probably have to charge more because there's more work on your side. There's more that has to come into the analysis. How do you justify going into these much, much more advanced models instead of just using our tried and true matrix questions and single select questions?
And I know, yes, it does add complexity, but all the complexity is really with us. It's not really with the respondent. It's not really with the client, because we summarize everything and we put it all together into one report. And yeah, through the advances of technology, using new techniques for analyzing the data, actually the costs are coming down. We can transcription you've mentioned. There's a lot of things that we can now do a lot faster and cheaper than we were able to do a few years ago. But for me, really, it's about getting to the root cause, and it always has been. That's one of the reasons why I went into research in the first place. When a client comes to us with a problem, we want to find the root cause. We don't just want to find an answer. We want to find the answer that solves the client's problem. And that's worth investing in, because usually those problems are quite big problems for the clients. And if they manage to solve it, there's a lot of financial benefit. So it is worth investing if you genuinely want to solve the problem, spend a bit more money on the research.
Makes sense. And Charlotte, how about for your perspective? I mean, sounds like you could maybe run a simple, conjoint's never simple. Make it a little simpler with QuestionPro, but why not just use a conjoint to kind of say, hey, which product would you buy out of these 4 options with these benefits? How do you kind of justify that additional complexity with the virtual store environment?
I mean, I think I would argue it's a bit less complex in a sense than a conjoint, and it is a lot more realistic than a conjoint. And I've done conjoints in my time, but I think that what we do is actually putting people into a situation where they are shopping. We're not asking them to make those either or decisions, we're asking them to make a decision. And that decision is the one that they might actually make in store. They're never going to be like, oh, this one with this percentage, and or this one in this colour. That's not a realistic bit of human choice decision, I think. I think also this kind of you're talking about the say do gap. We've just done a big piece of work on with an alcohol brand, and they were looking at different merchandising kind of solutions at shelf, and they were looking at their shopper decision tree, and they got this is the first decision, the second decision, third decision. They wanted to actually test, is that true? And so they were splitting multi-packs away from single packs, and what we actually found was that supported category growth, because the way that the shelf had been set up was by brand, and they were like, great, so we'll sell more because our brand is all blocks. But actually the category grew when you split it by the initial purchase decision was, I want a single can of beer, or I want a multi-pack can of beer, and then I'm going to make a decision about the brand. It wasn't brand first, then format. So you could ask those questions and people would be like, well, yeah, it's definitely the brand. But it's not. It's actually because I'm here and I'm going to go and see my mates, I'm going to get a multi-pack, or I'm just going to have a single beer to myself. So I think that's where we're making it simpler, actually, because we're giving the right answer. So they don't have to keep asking the same question. They can get the right answer and then they can implement it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And tell us, I think, from both of your perspective, we think at QuestionPro a lot about survey drop-off rates, but then also engagement, making the surveys fun and gamified. When you kind of pop that exercise in the middle of a survey, how do you think about those dynamics? I mean, obviously, length of interview, I'm guessing, goes up. Cost of sample might go up. Drop-off rates, do you see more or less? Tell us a little bit about that kind of survey journey. I mean, we're all used to tracking drop-off rates and LOIs and the rest. So,
something I'm holding it, I'll answer it. Our length of interview is about 7 minutes in total. So including QuestionPro at the start and the end, and that is completely by choice. We don't want to be asking too many questions. We want to know who these people are, so that we can kind of categorize them in that way. If we want to get them to do that, the shopping exercise, and then we want to get them to evaluate it to some degree, so that we can understand, was it easier, was it more intuitive, was it communicating benefits of products better? Because that is useful and interesting kind of support to what they do at Fixture. So yeah, we keep it short on purpose. We also have various things in there which it will load very quickly onto your laptop or your mobile, but we hold people at the start so that they can't just go in and bam, 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 you do it too quickly. We actually are trying to get them to put themselves into a bit more of a position where they go in and they make a considered shot. So we don't gamify it either in that sense, but we just try to make it as realistic as we can. And the platform is just in terms of the shop is really easy. Like it's very intuitive. They can zoom in, they can move around, they can do all those things. So in a sense, it's quite fun to go and do that, rather than being like, yes, I agree strongly.
Right.
No, I disagree.
Right.
You know, like it's a nice thing to go through.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I mean by gamifying, right? It's like you're making the experience fun, it's more engaging. Just quickly, do you see your drop-off rates in the survey experience a bit higher, lower than typical
The
selecting basic
start
surveys?
polls provider we use say our drop-off rates are really, really low. So we have very little drop-off because we're not asking really difficult things, I guess. And what they're being asked to do is quite a fun exercise.
You're making it more fun for the participants than what they're used to doing, right? And so they're actually kind of engaged more than the typical boring survey that some people use. Very interesting. Annett, tell us a little bit more on your side. What are you seeing in terms of drop-off rates and engagement in these new kind of behaviors?
I would say we're very similar. I think the respondents enjoy those types of advanced tools a bit more. And so when we use online eye tracking, all they have to do is look at a brochure, look at an advert. There's not a lot of effort, really. They just do what they would normally do in a normal day-to-day environment. So those parts of the survey tend to be quite quick, enjoyable, and no, we haven't seen an increase in top-off rates, really, even if sometimes the surveys are a bit longer, because it's variation as well. You have some standard questions and you go into a different section of the survey, and I know by the time you realize you've done 3 sections, it's already done.
Yeah. What would you say your typical length of interview is?
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes is not bad, right? I mean, you're still kind of in that sweet spot. And I think this is something that we talk to our clients about all the time, is like, make the survey engaging, make it fun, and you can get to even longer length of interviews because you're kind of differentiating the experience and you're actually collecting much more rich data at the end of the day. Super interesting. Mike, tell us a little bit more from your perspective. Obviously, these are all now new tools that researchers have to kind of integrate into their research tech stack. Does that just mean that everybody has like 25 tools in their research tech stack these days? Like how do the people that you talk to process all of this, think about what to budget for, what to buy? How does it work now that there's so many more options in terms of methodologies and tools that you can integrate into the experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting tension because my business relies on helping people navigate this new space, but still leaving them just insecure enough that they need to keep coming back. So, there's way too many out there. When you look at this thing, you mentioned this thing that I published today. It's like 250 AI tools for research.
Right.
It's just crazy. So there's going to be a lot of kind of thinning out for one thing. If you look at any of the marketing tech reports and surveys that come back from people, what you've seen over the last few years is this huge explosion. I forget what his name is, the chief MarTech guy, the MarTech 5,000, 10,000, 15,000.
Scott Brinker?
Scott Brinker. There's this huge growth in all these CRM and marketing tools. The feedback from the marketing teams is decreased utilization and, just far too many tools than they can actually get value from. So consolidation is going to come, and a lot of tools that are businesses right now are not really businesses, they're features that are going to be rolled in, and you've got a ton of stuff in your roadmap, I'm sure we'll see, that's how most of these technology markets play out. But I think there's some bigger pieces that are going to change how we work as research and insights people, and there's a piece today in Marketing Week, Mark Risson's today's column about synthetic data again, which I know is kind of like a red rag to the bull for some people. But if we've already asked a load of questions and we've got the data that provides an answer, why the hell do we need to ask more questions to get the same answer? So there's a lot of stuff which is confidently predictable. So whether it's like eye tracking results, you can show 100 people an image of a baby and they're going to look at the face. You can model that and you can predict a virtual heat map that we don't need to do primary research to get to that answer. So there's a lot of stuff like that which is going to become predictive rather than needing to gather fresh data. So what we're left with is, the fresh data gathering is for the interesting stuff, the innovation stuff, the stuff that's at the margins, that really makes a difference. So, I think those are some of the kind of the bigger changes that are coming, and the way that we interact with data and information is going to evolve as well. It's going to become much more conversational, much more interactive, without needing to be quite such a quant nerd, to get your answers out of the data. So, yeah, it's a lot of interesting things that are going to change the way we all work in the next few years.
Yeah, makes sense. So, maybe people in the room are excited to try out some of these things and try some new methodologies, but I imagine some are thinking, how do we budget for this? Where does the money come from? All right, all these things sound good and advanced, but it also might cost more. Mike, from your perspective, how are you seeing that kind of budgeting piece work when there are so many of these these tools in the landscape, so many options to pick from? Is it coming from the full service budget? Are people moving things around? How do your clients think about it?
The budget piece is, or the discretionary cost piece is one element. The other is actually bandwidth, resources, and skills in the team. So that's as much of a barrier as actual cash. It does pass an advantage to incumbents if you've got an existing relationship and you can help an organisation navigate their way through that change, or bring in a partner, or roll out a feature. Then it's going to be much easier if you've got that existing relationship and actually getting a new vendor in. And new vendors have to jump through a lot of hoops. So there's all of this choice in theory. In practice, you hit legal, compliance, procurement, you hit an awful lot of brick walls trying to onboard a new tool. So it's challenging to actually get these things up and running beyond just the budget and so on.
Yeah. Well, as Annett and Charlotte said, there's also pretty good data on the fact that these provide the ROI, that you're making better decisions at the end of the day by using this behavioral data and these advanced methodologies. So feel free to chat with these folks during the break or after the sessions. They've got a lot of really good insights. They're working in this day and night on a lot of these advanced methodologies, and I think are really pushing the envelope in terms of what you can do by integrating these things into the survey experience. So thank you so much to all of you for chatting a little bit more about these cutting edge methodologies.